This is a story about rejection of Baal, about realizing that Baal is a false god that should just be thrown on the trash heap. And that also is kind of the element of what's going on in Pesach as well, that the sort of bare minimum to ante up and sort of step into good standing as a member of this new nation that's being created is to reject the gods of the Egyptians and do so publicly, and take some risk in doing that, right? Like they're risking their lives by doing that, but they do it together, and it turns out that it actually saves their life instead of it being, a risk to them. But risking being punished for blasphemy in ancient Egypt is no small matter. So when we look at that in the context of Eliyahu, I think the way to think of it is that if you're going to try to get these broken apart stones of the different tribes to come back together, one of the things you need is powerful national feeling, and I think since the war started, we have a lot more of that, Baruch Hashem, and that's one of the few good things to come out of the horrendous way that this war started, is that it has shocked the nation into understanding that our enemies are what we actually have to direct our wrath at instead of at each other. And that, strengthens the sense of we're in this together, we're one nation, we are all trying to help each other and save each other and all of that. And all that's to the good. But it's not enough to just have that feeling. And like we said, it's not going to work to say, let's meet halfway. And it's also not going to work to say, okay, so let's figure out which tribe was right, and then everyone else just does what that tribe is doing and admits they were wrong, because that's the hardest thing. That's the sort of, everyone thinks that they're right? The Torah is not about relativism. It doesn't say that all the different 12 separate stones are each equally correct. There is someone who's correct here, which is Eliyahu. Eliyahu says that Hashem is the one God, and he's correct about that. But while the Torah is not relativistic, it understands the psychological and social difficulty of relativism from the many perspectives that are involved, right? So if you're all these different people, they all think they're doing the right thing. They may not all be doing the right thing equally well, but it's very hard to convince someone that their whole way of doing things is upside down. And you don't really have much of a chance of doing that by argument, usually. It usually requires people first being shocked in some way and beholding wonders and whatever else. So the alternative that's being suggested here by this connection to Pesach, I would want to argue, is the recognition that even when Am Yisrael are not so inclined to turn all the way to Hashem and embrace all of the Torah, because that's very difficult for everyone, no matter who you are, that what we have in common, going back, interestingly, to Avraham, like all the way back to where we came from, our beginnings with Avraham Avinu, it's the idol smashing bug, right? It's that what we're always good at, whether we're religious or whether we're secular, whether we're this or whether we're that, what we're always good at is pointing out that some gods are clearly garbage, right? It's commonly the case that Jews throughout history have been very good at pointing out that this is idolatry, and then they turn around and pick another form of idolatry that they decide they want to believe in, right? And they get the worst of both worlds and incur the wrath of the people that they've been provoking by sort of humiliating their gods. And then they turn around and don't actually have it right, and they stumble over the contradictions of the other idols that they've chosen. So you see that in many kinds of examples. But the point is, there's a positive and useful ability there that the whole tribe shares, which is this cantankerous tendency to do some idol smashing, right? To ask questions and to not be, easily won over by scams or by smoke and mirrors, and to probe things and to turn them over and to look at them this way and that and kick the tires and demonstrate that someone else's theory is stupid and demonstrate that someone else's claim about how their magic works is actually a lie and everything else. And not just like with ancient idols, but also with modern ideas, right? That you have Jews who are purveyors of every sort of false modern idea, but you also have other ones who come along and are some of the most brilliant eviscerators of those ideas. And that just has to do with the discursive quality of the culture, right? That once you have that in your language and in your bones and in your family and your tradition, as we know, especially in the 19th and 20th centuries and 21st century, huge numbers of Jews who are totally estranged from Yahadut, from Torah, have retained at a cultural level a kind of incisiveness about how to critique ideas that is applicable and is useful in the destruction of certain idolatries, even if one is not so versed in what HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants from us. And of course, what often happens in the secular version of that is that people get too clever for their own good, and they start saying, well, I'm such a good idol smasher, then I'll smash the idol of Hashem, and I'll prove that biblical religion is stupid. And that usually ends up being some kind of, folly of low intellectual standards, where you sort of idol smash a straw man instead of addressing the tradition in its real depth. But in any case, what that means in practical terms, and this is, where I think we can close for this discussion, is if we were asking now about the present day, what does Am Yisrael need in this moment? We need to be unified. We need to be united. We need to, Yachad Ninatzeach has truth to it. But it can't be an empty slogan where we just say, let's all get together even though we don't agree, and get together on the basis of nothing. Or let's all, throw away all our standards and get together on the basis of the lowest common denominator, where no one believes in anything anymore, or everyone abandons their God, including the people who had it right at some level and were insisting on Hashem and his Torah. That's not what we want. But if that's not what we want, then what could be the mechanism for substantive increase in unity, aside from external threat, aside from we're one nation, we're one tribe, they all want to kill us, all of that helps. But on top of that, the opportunity that this mention of Pesach in the text is suggesting is that it may be that there is an opportunity to unify around rejection of certain foreign gods or foreign idols or foreign standards or whatever, even when doing so doesn't automatically guarantee that everyone now is sort of on the same page in, yes, we have to serve Hashem and this is how we have to serve Hashem, right? Because that's what we need. We need it to be the case that there's something we can agree on that HaKadosh Baruch Hu will see as he turned towards him, but that doesn't require everyone signing up first for exactly this kind of keeping kasher and exactly this kind of keeping Shabbat and all the other stuff. Because that kind of demand for unity is much more just saying, let's make two rocks that are split apart, fuse back together by getting one of the rocks to agree that actually it was completely wrong and it should just start doing what the other rock is doing, right? That's not going to happen. That's an unrealistic goal for the short term in this society. It's a wonderful goal to have in the long term when everyone evolves towards the better goal that Hashem wants us to have, because everyone has changes they need to make and things they need to fix. Religious and secular and Haredi and Dati Leumi and whatever, all the different varieties and stripes. But in the short term, if we're going to all turn together towards Hashem, it's going to be because we're turning together away from some foreign god, some foreign standard that we can at least agree is stupid. And fortunately, in the current situation, I think it might be the case, B'ezrat Hashem, that there is potential for that kind of a turn. Maybe not with 100% of people in this country, but at least with a plurality, a significant percentage, and a significant plurality from different sectors of all kinds. And why is that? Think again about the prophets of Baal. That part of what they're doing is they're jumping back and forth and lashing themselves and doing all of their activities, all their magic that's supposed to work. And it's not fixing things, right? It's not getting the result that people are trying to get. The fire doesn't come down. What does it mean that Hashem doesn't accept your offering and the fire doesn't come down? It means that you keep waiting and waiting and waiting for the resolution of something, and you feel like the creator of the world is just holding his hand, stop, and preventing you from proceeding, right? That you're blocked. And if we view that in those terms, then I think that there are many aspects of that in the way that this war is felt. There have been tremendous successes, Baruch Hashem, on the battlefield when it comes to the level of the politicians, when it comes to the level of negotiations about the hostages, when it comes to the level of all the different swirling forces around us with, the endless higher intensity exchanges on the northern border, keeping 100,000 people or more out of their homes. It has not had any resolution yet. The sense that we haven't actually restored any kind of deterrence with Iran after what they did to us, not just with the recent attack, but with going back to the start of the war. On Shmini Atzeret, and there's still it's incredibly painful to remember. There's still the remaining hostages that are being held in Gaza. There's still also a great many armed and trained fighters amongst our enemies in Gaza who haven't been destroyed. And everything else that is unresolved because of all of the just endless, posachim, right? Jumping back and forth and lashing oneself and trying to work the magic according to the standards of the foreign gods, which is, of course, according to the standards of what the US expects and the Europeans expect, and all the different forces around in the world whose standards require things of us that tie our hands and say, you can't do this because then you'll be violating international law, and you can't do that because these people are innocent, even though they actually provided the whole base of operation from which this attack was launched, and you, and in many cases, participated in all of the worst atrocities. But still, when the UN is counting, they're innocent and you can't touch them, etc. All these different ways in which really religions of the rest of the world are being translated into policymaking at the highest levels, and the way that this war is being managed by our leaders. And I think that we are at a point where it must be the case that a whole lot of the nation is fed up, right? And not even fed up in some way where people are, poring over the text of the Torah and saying, oh, look, when captives were taken in the book of Numbers, Israel swore an oath that they would utterly destroy the enemy, and we have to do the same. We have to utterly destroy the enemy. Some people might be convinced by that. There are plenty of people who will hear that and say, but that's not a basis for making a decision. But one basis for making a decision is seeing that the fire is not taking the offer to Baal, right? That what we've been doing so far hasn't gotten us far enough yet. Hasn't gotten us far enough with returning hostages. It hasn't gotten us far enough with destroying the enemy and making the whole world look and see that you can't win this way. Because if it's still the case that part of the Hamas leadership are alive and their army is alive, then they can come out at the end and say that this was worth it to them by their own calculus. If it's the case that, we haven't done anything to assert greater sovereignty on the Temple Mount, perhaps they can say that they, succeeded. There's a whole lot of things that haven't happened yet since the war started. and perhaps could have happened if we weren't so prostrated before foreign gods that tell us we can't do this and we can't do that. And it may be, Bezrat Hashem, soon the case that there are enough people here, Jews of all stripes, not necessarily who already feel some deep connection to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, but who at least see the folly and the stupidity of the idolatries governing American foreign policy, European foreign policy, whatever else is, creating this labyrinth of red lights for us so we can't go this way and we can't go that way. People are starting to see that this doesn't work and it doesn't make sense. And there may be an opportunity for much greater national unity, just rallying around simple ideas about what does work that has to do with saying we are going to do what will save the lives of our own soldiers, what will save the lives of the captives taken from our people, and we will not worry about the lives of the enemy that attacked us, and we will not worry about the declarations of or the cries of the hue and cry about Israeli criminality on campuses and in parliaments around the world, because we've tried worrying about those things and it's not getting us where we need to go. And if we would just, enough of us, say, look, we disagree about some things. We haven't worked it all out yet. We're not going to iron out all the fine details of where you can or can't have chametz on Pesach, etc. right now. But what we can do is slaughter the lamb and paint the blood on the door, right? We can all at least agree to defile the gods, the foreign gods, by showing that we are willing to turn away from them and towards each other and our need for unity around our common kinship and purpose. And perhaps, ideally with a notion that is also a turn towards Hashem, with details to be worked out later of exactly who's right about exactly how much of the Torah needs to be kept and how. So B'ezrat Hashem, soon we will see Am Yisrael identify a clear opportunity for a strong majority of the Jewish people here in the land of Israel and perhaps the world round to say enough is enough. This thing that you say is a constraint for us, like is an idol that we have to prostrate ourselves before, we're going to kick it over and ignore it because we know better. We know what's right, and what's right here is for us to win this war in a way that follows standards that come within the tradition of our nation and are not being handed to us by imperial overlords. And at the time that we do that, I think what we're seeing here is that there will also be a chance for the world and for Am Yisrael to be dazzled by the wonders that Hashem may be willing to do for us in recognition of that sincere, unified national turn away from idolatry and towards Him. And we even saw maybe a small example of that in microcosm with what happened with the recent exchange with Iran, right? Because we blew up a building with some very high-ranking Iranian generals in it, and that was a gutsy move. That is, if you had asked me, do I think that our leadership would be willing to make that play, knowing the circumstances, I'm not sure I would have guessed that they would have necessarily been bold enough to do it, right? Because they're very practiced at doing these strikes in Syria and Lebanon. But going for the top of the food chain has different political implications. And whenever political implications and things that might upset the Americans get involved, these people, Bibi, Gantz, Eisenkot, Ashkenazi, Gallant, et cetera, they tread very, very carefully. So I'm not sure I would have necessarily believed that they could, make that play, and they did. And the night that the Iranians sought to respond, an enormous barrage of deadly weaponry was launched in our direction, and the whole thing fell flat. And this was a tiny, tiny instance of what we're talking about here, because obviously in that situation, it was like one click outside of the comfort zone of what Tzahal does anyway. They're used to blowing up Iranians in Syria who are involved in trying to get weapons moved over there so they can be shot at us. And this was just kind of, as we said, higher up in the food chain. And it's also just one click outside of the realm of normal in terms of wonders, because it was so easy after the fact for everyone to say, well, the US and the British and the French helped us, and don't we have really great missile defense systems? And really, that's because we need American money, and all of this stuff that turns into a justification for actually staying in the same mindset. So I don't think that was enough to nudge us out. But I think that you see the mechanism there where just doing the right thing and not saying sorry, and doing it in a way that defies the rules set by the gods of the imperial overlords, that was enough to earn for us 99.9% interception, which we have to say was a great wonder that Hashem made for us, given what else could have happened. It's very easy to forget that we don't always get stellar performance from our complex high-tech systems. In fact, it was systematic failure of many complex high-tech systems that made slaughter at the beginning of this war possible. And so, yeah, sometimes we invest a lot in complex high-tech systems and they undergo catastrophic failure. And in this instance, the opposite happened. We saw, a brilliant clutch performance that HaKadosh Baruch Hu choose to grant to us in that moment. And then certainly it was in the zchut of a leadership that is almost completely prostrated before our foreign fair weather allies, and that they made a choice that sort of stepped out of the realm of the normal, and thereby towards Hashem, like with the painting of the blood of the lambs on the door. So may we merit as a nation find opportunities soon to tell the whole world they don't know right from wrong as well as we do, and that we're going to prosecute this war to completion in the way that is necessary for us to survive and flourish in our land that belongs to our nation since Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, and Sarah, Rivka, Leah, Rachel, and that if we do that, Bezrat Hashem, soon, that will be the moment when the fire comes down and Hashem puts his stamp of approval on everything in a way that no one will be able to miss.